Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get into some seriously cool ideas?
Always.
Awesome. So today we're looking at this work called Beyond Precision, and it kind of flips the script on how we usually think about language.
Oh, this should be good. I love when things get turned upside down.
Right. It's all about ambiguity and how something we usually think of as a problem, like being unclear, can actually be a strength.
Huh. Interesting. Ambiguity as a positive. I'm intrigued.
Me too. So before we get too far, can you maybe just lay out what we mean when we say linguistic ambiguity? What's the core concept here?
Sure. Think about it like this. How often do you run into a word that has a bunch of different meanings? Like bank, for instance. It could be a place to keep your money or the side of a river.
Oh, yeah, good example.
Exactly. That's ambiguity in action. It's when a single word or even a whole phrase can have multiple interpretations. It's not always clear cut.
Okay, so it's all around us. But beyond precision is saying it's not just some random quirk, it's actually a powerful tool. They even call it a feature, not a bug. How does that work?
Well, think about trying to describe something super complex, like love or grief, using only literal language, like just the facts, no frills.
I feel like that would be so robotic.
Totally. It would be super hard to really capture the feeling. But ambiguity lets us use things like metaphors, like a heavy heart. That's not literally true, but
But we get it instantly. It conveys that emotion perfectly.
right. It goes beyond just a simple description. And that connects to another big idea from the source, recursion in language. Ever heard of that?
Vaguely, refresh my memory.
So recursion is like this: ability to embed clauses within clauses. Basically, you create these layers within a sentence.
Layers. I think I need an example.
Okay, like think about telling a story, right? You've got your main point, then maybe you throw in a side story to explain something. And within that side story, there could be another little detail or anecdote tucked in.
Oh, I see. It's like those Russian nesting dolls, each one inside the other.
Exactly. You're adding depth and complexity. And that's recursion at work. You build richer meaning through all these layers. It's not just one flat sentence.
So we're not just spitting out facts, we're building these elaborate structures of meaning.
Precisely. And on top of that, beyond precision, points out that we often communicate way more than the literal meaning of the words we use.
True. Like, our tone of voice can completely change how something comes across.
Yeah, or even just our facial expressions, right? Or the situation, like the context of the conversation, all that stuff adds layers of meaning that go beyond the words themselves.
So ambiguity makes this layered communication possible. We can kind of read between the lines.
Exactly. It creates space for nuance. We don't always have to spell everything out. We can rely on subtle cues and hints.
It's like we're always figuring out what the other person really means, based on the context. We might even need to ask clarifying questions.
Yeah, it's a back and forth process. Communication isn't just a one-way street.
And the cool thing is, we're doing all this without really thinking about it most of the time. Beyond precision says this ability to go beyond the literal, to use ambiguity for subtle meaning, is part of what makes language so powerful.
Absolutely. It's not just about conveying information. It's about understanding and connecting on a deeper level.
So the source even goes as far as to call language a cognitive technology, like it's something that's actually shaped human progress. How so?
Think about it. We can communicate these really complex ideas. We can pass knowledge down to the next generation, build on each other's discoveries, things that no other species can do, really.
Right, we're not just reacting to our immediate environment.
Exactly. And that's largely because of language. And ambiguity, with all its nuance and layering, has been essential to that process. It's not just about being precise, it's about being able to convey the depth and richness of human thought.
I see. And that makes me think about translation, how tricky it can be to get meaning across when languages are so different.
Yeah, the source talks about that too, how each language has a unique way of seeing the world.
It's like, are there things that are just impossible to translate directly?
Absolutely. There are certain words and ideas that just don't have a perfect equivalent in another language because each language embodies its own set of concepts and cultural perspectives.
So linguistic diversity actually shapes how we think. The way we use ambiguity might differ depending on the language we speak.
Totally. And this leads us to another big idea the source highlights: metaphor.
Oh yeah, metaphors, we usually think of those as like poetic devices.
Right, but they're actually way more fundamental to how we think than we realize. They let us map these complex ideas onto things we're already familiar with, making them easier to grasp.
Give me an example.
Well, like think about Einstein's famous thought experiments. He imagined riding a beam of light to figure out how time dilation worked. That's a powerful metaphor, right? It helped him make sense of something incredibly abstract.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. So this kind of productive ambiguity can actually fuel creative breakthroughs. It sounds counterintuitive.
I know, right? But it makes sense if you think about it. Ambiguity allows for multiple interpretations, so it pushes us to think outside the box. It helps us see things in new ways, make unexpected connections.
And that's how innovation happens. Without that flexibility, we'd be stuck in these rigid thought patterns.
Exactly. Our thinking would be much more limited. We need that ambiguity to spark creativity and push boundaries.
This is fascinating. And speaking of pushing boundaries, beyond precision even gets into the evolutionary advantages of ambiguous language. What's the idea there?
Okay, so picture this. You've got our early ancestors, right? They needed to communicate both immediate stuff like, hey, danger, and then also more abstract ideas about the future, like planning a hunt.
Wow, so it's about survival too.
Yeah, and ambiguity, being able to convey a lot of information in a compact way, probably gave him a real edge. It made communication super efficient.
It allowed for flexibility. They could adapt to different situations and communicate more effectively.
Exactly. Plus, it allowed them to build social cohesion. They could share stories and ideas, strengthening their bonds. Ambiguity was likely a key ingredient in their success.
Wow, so ambiguity might be woven into our very evolution as a species. That's amazing. But the source does also say there needs to be a balance between precision and ambiguity, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not like ambiguity is always the best choice, no matter what.
So how do we know when to use it?
It's all about context. Think about the difference between, say, a technical manual, which needs to be super precise, and a poem, which thrives on being open to interpretation.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. So it's not that one is better than the other. It's about choosing the right tool for the job.
It all boils down to recognizing that ambiguity isn't inherently good or bad. It's an element of language that can be used in different ways depending on the goal.
Exactly. It's all about understanding how powerful ambiguity can be and using it strategically.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. It really makes you think, if language were totally precise, with no ambiguity at all, what would we lose?
That's a great question. Would we still have those aha moments, those creative sparks? I mean, would we even be able to fully express the complexity of human experience?
That's something to ponder for sure. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of ambiguity. We've learned that what we often see as a flaw might actually be the key to language's flexibility and power.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll catch you on our next dive.
Hey there.